Bizarre Brain Comics. Hello, my comic book friends, and welcome to Bizarre Brain Comics. I am Gary, your host. And this is where I like to take a look at some older comics, talk a little bit about the characters and creators, and then examine the stories and the art. Before we get to talking about this, I want to give a little shout out to some of the other YouTubers out there, like Dope Comics. He's a wild man. He's crazy. I love him. Dope Comics likes to focus on horror and especially pre-code horror stuff. That's Dope_Comics, and comics with an X. And another one I really like is Scott Pyle. It's Pyle. It's like Gomer Pyle. It's the Scott Pyle channel where Scott reads comics. And don't forget the Classic Comic Collector, Comic Book Geezers, and another one I'm trying to think of, and I can't right at the moment. And also Sophie Lawson. It's not about comics. She talks a little bit about comics. Her stuff is mostly about art. And of course, then there is what was his name? Greg Beard. I think that's right. Greg Beard, who does some really, really fine stuff about the history of illustration and forgotten illustrators. Really worth checking out. Some really nice stuff on those. So this is what I want to talk about this time around. Ant-Man and the Wasp. We just had that recent Ant-Man and Wasp movie, Quantumania, come out. Just watched it a couple weeks ago with my wife, and we really enjoyed it. I mean, it's not perfect, but it was a nice introduction to Kang, who is the next big villain in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. And this book is True Believers, reprint from 2017, commemorating the 100th anniversary. 100th anniversary of the birth of Jack King Kirby. At least that's how he is known in the comics world. But his real name was Jacob Kurtzberg, co-creator of Captain America and co-creator of most of the Marvel characters through the 60s with Stan Lee. And if it was something big and robust and powerful, Jack Kirby was involved in it back then. Remember the Avengers and the Hulk and the Fantastic Four. He even had a role in the creation of Spider-Man. And of course Thor. You can really see his influence in Thor. And of course Galactus and the Silver Surfer. Yeah. So this was reprinted in 2017, and is also as part advertisement for, I think it was the Ant-Man and the Epic collection. Is that what they were called? I don't know. I didn't buy them. They're too expensive for me, but I picked up several of these reprint stuff to get a better grasp on some of the stuff that I missed way back when, because I was both too young and had no money. So Ant-Man, there were several superheroes bearing the name of Ant-Man in the Marvel Comics universe, created by Stan Lee, Larry Lieber, and Jack Kirby. And he made his first appearance, although he wasn't called Ant-Man, in Tales to Astonish number 27 in 1962. And that was when Tales to Astonish was an anthology title, and it was presented as a horror/monster type story. It's where the Ant-Man made his first appearance, but he was not called the Ant-Man. But he made his first appearance in costume in Tales to Astonish number 35, also in 62. That was later. And the original Ant-Man was Hank Pym, and later the reformed criminal Scott Lang adopted the moniker after Pym had adopted various other aliases like Goliath, Giant Man, Yellow Jacket. For a while, he was just known as Dr. Pym because he couldn't change his own size, but because he had some side effects from all those years of changing his size, but he was able to change the size of other things. And then later, someone named Eric O'Grady became Ant-Man. I know absolutely nothing about Eric O'Grady. See, and the Wasp, of course, was Janet Van Dyne, and she made her first appearance in Tales to Astonish number 44 from 1963. Ant-Man needed a partner, and Wasp was it, or was her. And of course, the stories in this book were ostensibly written by Stan Lee and drawn by Jack Kirby. Don Heck did the inks on the Ant-Man and Wasp story, and he did a really, really nice job on that. I've talked about Don Heck a little bit before. Sometimes I like his stuff, sometimes I don't. It depends. I talked about him more in depth. I think it was with Dial H for Hero, and I really liked that. He did the pencils and inks, and I really liked that one. I didn't care for his inks on that a gothic romance one I did just a few weeks ago, and I suddenly cannot remember the title. But it was a gothic romance, and where his artwork was fine, I just did not like his inking on that. But I do like his inking in this one. So, and he did the inking on this cover, which was penciled by Jack Kirby. And as so often is the case, when they lacked other menaces, they would fall back on some kind of monster, or some kind of alien, or both. In this case, it was an alien monster coming out of the Marvel days of all the monster stuff from Atlas. And before we get into that, I want to remind you that if you want, I can do these character cards just like these for you if you want. Full color or black and white, but the full color the color looks best. Full figure or a portrait, or in this case, like with the Wolverine, was a kind of a bust. And you can contact me with pertinent information in the comments below, or email me directly here at my email address. Make it to Attention Art Commission. And I'll see what we can do for you. Okay, and here we are. As I said, this is from 2017 Jack Kirby cover. This is reprinting the cover to Tales to Astonish number 44, which introduced the Wasp. So let's take a quick look inside. Here we have Tales to Astonish number 27, and The Man in the Anthill. That is the first appearance of Hank Pym being shrunk down. And here, instead of giant monster, it's the tiny monsters. And I have to wonder if this story might not have been inspired in some part by the great early 1950s movie Them, about the giant ants. Just watched that not too long ago. It was a great one. Great movie. And that's a Kirby cover. And as I said, we'll just talk very briefly about this. It was presented as like one of their monster / horror type stories. Kirby stuff. Hank Pym making his discovery, shrinking himself down, forgetting to put his antidote growth serum close by. He's outside and he's being harassed by the ants. He gets into an anthill. One of the ants helps him out. So it's just basically his terror in the anthill, and boom. And in that first Ant-Man movie, they kind of recreated some of those the scene there. And then here we have celebrating Kirby's 100th Monsters. I'd love to have that one, but if it wasn't so expensive. And then Marvel Masters, and then just Kirby Legacy. That's great. Then here, this is where we get into the story. Ant-Man and the Wasp battle the creature from Cosmos. Here, great dynamic splash page, and that's a great cover design there too. Nice splash page, and as you can see, it's plot by Stan Lee, script by H.E. Huntley, with art by Jack Kirby and Don Heck. And I think Don Heck did a really nice job. You can go through here, and you can see Kirby-ness in it, but Heck's style comes through, and especially in the faces. It was a really Don Heck faces, and his previous work, both romance and the like, really came in handy here, because the face of the female characters are much more lovely than Kirby could do himself. And this is just an Ant-Man story, and here we find out some of his past that we hadn't had before, and is then kind of forgotten about later on. He had been married before, a Hungarian lady, and shortly after they got married, they went on a honeymoon and went to Hungary, and because she and her father had been political escapees, she was murdered, and that is part of his backstory and his impetus to be a superhero. And of course, Pym is a scientist. And then here is being visited by another scientist, Professor Van Dyne, and he meets Janet Van Dyne, his daughter. They talk, and he says, "I'm sorry, I can't help you here." Here's a great image of a Don Heck face from a Jack Kirby drawing. And then, of course, the experiment that Van Dyne was doing was with some kind of gizmo to try to communicate with outer space, and it accidentally brings this monster creature down to Earth, which promptly kills Van Dyne. And this is a gimmick. It's like culled directly from the origin of DC's John Jones' Martian Manhunter, because that's how he first came to Earth. And it's the same concept that was later used in that really disappointing Howard the Duck movie. Instead of using anything like the Howard the Duck origin from the comics, they used this same concept. And it brought this creature down. Then Janet finds her father dead. She calls Hank Pym, and don't know why she didn't call the police. He was killed. And but here's some great. You see him as tiny, and everything's so large, like in the Land of the Giants, and the Incredible Shrinking Man. So I think Ant-Man is kind of inspired by Incredible Shrinking Man and them together. So he's got this catapult, and he's able to communicate with the ants, goes to see Van Dyne, sees the dead body, says something here has twisted and destroyed all this metal equipment, and he gets a report from the ants. So there was a mist in there. Ants won't go near the place because it's something about formic acid, which is same with the ants. Has Janet call the FBI, and then she's supposed to go see Hank Pym at his laboratory. And here he is. You can just see this panel here. Just lovely work on those faces, and it's standard. But you can see from the dynamism and the figure work and the backgrounds. There's definitely Kirby, and then this really great face on Hank Pym, and how he reveals himself, because she has revealed that she's wants revenge and justice for everyone, and he reveals himself to her as Ant-Man. Says, "There's a way you can help me be a partner. Put the special thing with cells that when she shrunk down will give her wings and antennae, so she can communicate directly with the ants." Meanwhile, while that's going on, the monster has grown bigger and is attacking parts of New York. Latches onto the costume, gives her a brief tutorial on how to shrink and stuff. They get small. Yeah, it works. The wings work, and he's catapulted, and she flies to where the monster is. It's just a giant monster, and it's horrid. And there's the army, and they're attacking the George Washington Bridge. Kablooey, kablooey, kablooey. Standard monster fare, and but the ants can't help them. They can't go near the thing, and so she's got. So he comes up with an idea. They go back to get out a shotgun. Now this is where it gets downright silly. Of course, not the solution, but how they utilize it. Get out a shotgun. He knows what will destroy the monster. Puts some other stuff in there because it will counteract with formic acid, which the alien creature seems to be composed of. Puts those in the shotgun shells. Then they shrunk down. Has the ants carry the shells and the shotgun over to where they need to be, and then instead of staying full size, going to the top of the building and just blasting the monster at full size, instead of handicapping himself by settling himself with the ants and having himself down at ant size. That's silly. That's just downright silly. But boom, 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 several shots with this stuff, and the monster is defeated and destroyed and fades away. And they have won, and now Ant-Man has his new partner, Janet Van Dyne, the Wasp, and she has already fallen in love with him. She really reminds him of his first wife, and he's cautioning himself about falling in love with her, so that he can't handle losing anyone else like he did her. So he has decided he's not going to fall in love with her. But of course, we know that he does, and they eventually do get married. then ads for some of their other reprint titles. So that is a fun look at Ant-Man and the Wasp 60 years on. Yes, because it's 60 years for Ant-Man now. And so that's a lot of fun. Thank you for joining me. I hope you enjoyed that little trip into Ant-Man history. I really like the artwork. I like Don Heck's inking work on the Jack Kirby pencils in this story. And surprise, except for the goofiness of the way they made the conclusion, it's a fairly well written. Of course, it's very abbreviated. It would take more than that. There's so many gaps and holes in the story, but it's still quite enjoyable. And so that's what I've got for you. That please like, share, subscribe, leave a comment. Hey, yeah, leave me a comment. Have you ever read any of this old Ant-Man stuff? I don't really like this costume on Ant-Man with the helmet, rather than just the mask with antennae on it that he adopts later, and when he's Giant Man and Ant-Man both. And I happen to like this one. I like it with the helmet. And I'm not thrilled with the Wasp's little headgear here, but otherwise her costume is fine. And this is before she has her sting. So let me know if you have read any of these, if you like this. Which version of Ant-Man do you like best? I know virtually nothing of Scott Lang or Eric O'Grady. I only know the Hank Pym version. And I have read a little bit of the Scott Lang, but not much. So that's what we got. And remember, comics are art.